All right, so how you guys doing? So what is B theory of time? It's a mind-blowing idea in physics, and it's what most physicists believe in when it comes to how time works in the universe. It does pose one problem though, and I'm going to go through that problem and explain what that problem is and explain how Gnosticism answers that problem. So B theory of time basically is that all time frames exist simultaneously, whereas A theory of time is where time exists as like on a linear timeline. Now I'm going to be drawing at the same time as explaining to help it to be easier to understand. So let's deal with A theory of time first, and that's the type of time that most people think of as time when they think of as time. So A theory of time would be like this. Let's say the universe has it started as a singularity, and then it expanded outward, and now it is where it is now. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it's going to collapse on itself. So the shape of the timeline, first off, would be from starting point as singularity, all the way to the end point where the universe collapses. So the universe would be expanding out, and right now, let's say we're somewhere like this, and then eventually it's going to collapse, and as it collapses, it's going to come down back to a singularity, right? That would be A theory of time. It's just all one linear thing, and time moves forward through these different slices of time here, right? Through all these different slices spaced out. Now, there'd be a whole bunch of these. I'm just making it to where it's visible. And let's say we exist somewhere like right here, right now. That's what we call the present. Everything to the singularity would be the past. Everything to the collapse would be the future. And that's how we see things, right? Now imagine that B theory of time, and this is again just looking at it as a two-dimensional thing for right now. We'll get into all this stuff in a 3 dimensions here in a second. So in B theory of time, we think we're right here. That's one slice of time, but really every one of these slices of space-time have always existed. So the main difference between B theory of time and A theory of time is in A theory of time, that entire like football type shape, if you were to imagine from a, cutting the universe and slicing it in half, and just thinking about it as it being an expansion and collapsion, and think about that as a shape, kind of like a football, that has a beginning and has an end, and we're flowing toward the end. That's A theory of time. B theory of time is that all of those possibilities, all of those individual moments exist always, from the beginning of the singularity to the expansion to the collapsion, anything in between. So this entire thing right here, this entire shape has always been there. Okay, now that's kind of mind-blowing in itself. And you'd think, well, if everything has always existed, and every instant of everything has always existed, then how do I exist? How is it that I think? Why is it that I move forward through time? And this is where physicists don't have a good explanation to how consciousness works within B theory of time. However, there's tons of support for B theory, and please look all that up. I don't have time to go into all that right now. It's going to take a long enough time just explaining that problem and how to fix that problem, and how time works within my understanding of my remembrance. For those that don't know, I am Neil, and you can find me at gnosticism.com among many other places. I'm also a renowned art teacher, and among other things, and so forth. So anyway, all right, so that's the basic idea. Now, imagine that A and B theory of time is like a movie reel. We're going to think about it flat first, and then we'll get to the 3D aspect. Sorry about this big old headset on my head. It just makes it where the sound is much easier than if I try to hook up my studio sound mic and stuff like that. In this space, it wouldn't sound good, and this sounds the best. So, all right. So now we've got to think about it as like a movie reel, right? So we have a movie reel here. I'm just going to draw part of the basic idea of a movie reel. And we have these individual pictures. Like that, right? Sorry, trying to go fast here. Okay, now imagine each one of those are an individual frame, an individual picture. Because remember, a movie is actually a bunch of individual still frames, right? So when you're watching a movie on the screen, the illusion is that there's movement happening. And what's caused that illusion is individual pictures are being played in front of you about, anywhere from 24 frames a second to 60 frames a second. It really just depends on the movie that you're watching. Hollywood, for a long time, I know they like that standard of the 24 frames a second. It has this really good aesthetic feel to it. I'm not sure if they still use that anymore. Right, so this would be like, frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, so forth. These are the individual pictures. And in this picture, the person is like, I don't know, let's say they're standing here like this. They're partway in the frame. They have one hand down and this hand is down. In the next frame, they're like this. And this hand starts to come upward like that. And then in the next frame, the hand is like upward now like that, like they're waving. And there'd be a lot more individual frames than that. I'm just giving a simple idea. And as you move through those frames or have those frames move through something that plays them on a projection screen, you get the idea of illusion, the same way the animation works for cartoons. Okay, so that's cool. That's how A theory of time works, because we have a beginning of the movie and we have an ending of the movie. Any given time, let's say we pause the movie right here, then that's where we're at in the movie at that particular time. And then if we unpause, we continue watching the movie. So that would be the present right here. And then everything that we have already watched would be the past. Everything we haven't watched would be the future of the movie, because we haven't seen it yet, right? Now imagine that same idea exists, but instead of the movie existing, and we know the whole entire film exists. This is why it's a good analogy right here. So we're watching it, but the movie's always existed. Well, not always, but has already existed before we started watching it. So all these frames, this last frame here, where it shows the ending of the movie, I'll just put an E for the ending of the movie. This last frame, I'll kind of shade it in, already existed prior to us starting to watch the movie. So we are consciously, being showed these pictures until we get to the end of the movie. But that entire movie film existed before we started watching it. I'm saying that a couple times to let it drive into your head. So imagine now that that's B theory of time, that the movie is representation, or is a representation of B theory of time. Imagine that this movie reel has existed forever in a static state. And at some point, conscious beings came and started to watch this movie. And as we start to watch this movie, if we end up right here on the movie and we press pause, we get a sense of the present. Why? Because we have memory of the past events of the movie that we watched, of the past scenes. Now imagine we didn't have a memory at all. We had no memory. We couldn't retain information. We always only had an experience of the now. Then if we pause the movie right here, we'd have no idea what happened previously. So we really wouldn't have a sense of the present, because we wouldn't know what's going on. We'd be like, I'm watching weird things happening, but you have no context because you have no past at all. Like you don't know what you're watching, right? It would make no sense. It'd be gibberish to you. Any given point of the movie that you're watching, it'd be gibberish. Even the beginning, because the beginning of the movie is always gibberish until it starts to form and make context. But it's our memory, I'll put an M here, it's our memory of the past events that make us feel like that present moment is a present moment, because we can remember everything that happened before it. So we know that, okay, all these events led up to this moment now, and so we call that feeling of presentness. And when we think about the past moments, that, our memories, when we dive into our memories of those past moments, that is the sensation of the past. Well, what gives us the sensation of the future? There is no sensation of the future. The sensation of the future is a logical deduction. You go, okay, well, I have the sensation of the present right now, and that's based on my memory of the past. And so if there was a past, 5 minutes ago, I wasn't doing what I'm doing now. And so logical deduction, 5 minutes ago, I wasn't doing what I'm doing now, so it's logical to believe that in 5 minutes from now, I'll be doing something different. That idea is the future. And so we have these future. It's like we're predicting what might happen in our mind, let's say in the case of this movie. Right, so that's interesting and neat, and that starts to understand how B theory of time works, because in B theory of time, this movie has always existed. But why is it that we flow through time the way we flow through time? And I'm going to get into that. So if you haven't gone through my video on the theory of everything, I highly recommend watching that. And that is Gnosticism's theory of everything. And it explains how everything works from the most smallest, most fundamental stuff, and how that all expands out to the stuff that we experience now in this 3D universe. So instead, now imagine that every movement, everything that we're doing right now, everywhere we're going, every part of the universe, take the entire universe and freeze it right now. That's one frame. Well, that's a 3D frame, right? The universe actually is not a sphere, like a lot of people might think of it. Rather, the shape of the universe. Sorry, I have this like itch on my nose, and I don't know if it's what it is, like a hair or something. So the shape of the universe is not a sphere like this, like a lot of people think. The shape of the universe is actually more like a pancake, right? Like this. So there is a north and south pole, if you want to think about that, of the universe. So there is like a width to the universe, but mostly it's flat, meaning that it's like our entire shape of our universe is very much like the shape of our galaxy or any galaxy. So a galaxy might look very flat when you see it out in space, but it actually has a width to it. It's so long compared to its width, like a piece of paper. A piece of paper is not flat. I mean, we think of it as flat, but it does have a thickness to it. You can actually measure the thickness of a piece of paper. And now that's not quite relatively how flat a universe is. It's more like a thin crepe, whatever, kind of like a very, very thin pancake. This right here is not a true representation. So what I should probably do here is redo that. It's really more like a galaxy. So this is kind of like the shape of the universe, and even that might not be the exact representation, but anyway. And let's say our galaxy is somewhere here in the universe, and Andromeda is somewhere here, and we have other galaxies out here. We have all these different galaxies within the universe, right? And they're all orbiting something. We don't know what they're orbiting, but we know that our galaxy is actually orbiting something. We don't know what that something is yet. And we know for sure that Andromeda is orbiting something, because Andromeda's orbit actually interacts with our galaxy, and that's supposed to be happening in the soonish era of, when they say soon, it could be a long time from now, but it's, soonish. And one of its arms is going to interact with one of our arms. So if you ever see Milky Way galaxy, it has like a bunch of arms come off, almost like a turn star, kind of looks like this. And it's got the arms come off like this. Just basic shape there. And one of Andromeda's arms is going to interact with our arms, and when that happens, it causes a lot of destruction, stuff like that. And I don't think it's going to be the arm that we're on. We're on towards the end of one of the arms of the Milky Way galaxy. And I don't think it's going to be interacting with that arm, so it shouldn't affect Earth too much, but it would definitely affect a lot of different planetary systems within our galaxy. Right, so anyway, we know everything it's rotating, the universe rotating around some sort of center. Now, within that shape of the universe, if I take any part of it, or I freeze it at any given time, because remember, this is the shape of the universe. Now we got to think back to that timeline. So when we think about that timeline, we have this right here represents the shape of the universe, the universe. These are all frozen universe states. Right now again, I'm drawing these as ovals up and down. I mean, that's maybe not, it doesn't really matter the orientation, right? Each one of these is a state of the universe, right? So kind of like a frame of a movie. Now what I mean by that is, take right now the universe as its entire whole, as it's expanding outwards, and freeze it. Boom. That one shape, remember, it's not a sphere. I know a lot of people think of the universe as a sphere. I used to think about that way too, until I started studying physics and stuff and learned, oh wow, it's not a sphere. It's actually, the mathematics shows that it's actually very flat. Flat in the sense that it's more like, like a pancake. It still has depth anyway. And so that is the shapes I'm kind of drawing here. That's kind of the shape of the whole universe, at least from a flat point of view. If you were to take the universe, the whole universe's shape, but basically think of a pancake, and then I'm taking the pancake and turning it this way, and I'm just kind of slicing it in half, and I'm drawing it. That's pretty much what you're seeing right here. So this is like, this shape right here would be like this, like the pancake, right? So that's how the universe is. So, but just keep in mind, that's representing a 3D shape. Okay. So for every moment, if I take right now and I just pause the universe and everything freezes, every molecule in your head freezes, every synapse stops working, everything is frozen. Every cell in your body freezes. Every neuron in your brain freezes. So there's no thought, right? So for that frozen moment, every person is a non-thinking thing because they're just frozen in time. Nothing is moving, nothing is happening. There's no movement anywhere in the entire universe. So this is what this state right here represents. This is a frozen state of the universe right there. So as we have this frozen state of the universe and another frozen state of the universe, these are two different frozen states of the universe. Now what would each frozen state of the universe be similar to? What would it kind of represent? Frozen state 1, frozen state 2. What they represent is kind of like frames on a movie, or frames on animation, or the individual pictures of a movie that when you move through one to the next, it gives you the illusion of time. So as we move from frame to frame to frame to frame, what would that give us the illusion of? The illusion of movement, right? So this is where it gets kind of interesting, because how does consciousness interact with this, and why does it interact the way it interacts? Why does it interact some other way? Excuse me. I probably should drink something. This is going to be kind of a long video. Not too long. Trying to sum up the ideas and thoughts, and then if you guys want more, then I can make it in more detail. Because it's a really, really complex topic. Just speed theory of time is a pretty complex topic for a lot of people. So this is state 3. So now the difference between this frozen state and this frozen state is just a slight change. That is less than a second from our point of view. That is from one point to the next. It's what we talk about Planck time. And this is actually one of the mind-blowing things about how time works is, and space works. So space-time is considered the same thing. All right, they do is look at special and general relativity. You see that space-time is the same thing. Time and space are one dimension. They're not separate ideas or concepts. They work together, kind of like a photon is a wave and a particle simultaneously. Okay, so let's go with this really fast. This is really interesting. So when we take a meter, right, we say, hey, this represents a meter. That's 1 full meter. And then we go, okay, well, we also have nanometers. Oh, excuse me. First off, we have millimeters. And so we have a meter, then we have millimeters, and millimeter has, a whole bunch of millimeters compared to a meter. And then we take a smaller measurement, and we go, okay, well, how many millimeters are in a meter, right? And we go, well, I think it's 1,000. And then how many, I think it's micrometers, are in a millimeter? And I think it's also 1,000. Or maybe it's times 1,000, I can't remember. And then we go, okay, well, can we get smaller than that? And then we go nanometers. Right? So nanometers, boom, there's a whole bunch of nanometers in a micrometer. Now what's smaller than nanometer? And you keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Now what happens is, eventually mathematics, all theories, be it string theory, be it, the the standard model, be it the cyclic model, the new Neil-Torx cyclic model, or be it pick a theory, multiverse theory, holographic principle, digital physics, all the math breaks down at some point. That is, it only goes so small and then math breaks down. And that is what we call Planck time and Planck space. Right? So the Planck scale is as small as we can get. We can't get any smaller than that. We can't measure anything smaller than that. Anything smaller than that, even the mathematics breaks down. So that's as small as you can get. That's weird, because that means there's nothing smaller than that. What does that mean? It means that you can't say, well, how many so-and-sos are there in a Planck? There is no. The Planck is the individual steps. And there's no in between. There's a Planck and there's a Planck and there's a Planck, right? So when you take Planck measurements, you say it's 3 Plancks across. It's exactly 3 Plancks across. It can't be 2.5 Plancks across, things like that, because there's nothing in between a Planck. A Planck is the smallest unit, so you can't have a half a Planck, right? It doesn't make sense. The math doesn't do that. This shows us that the ultimate state of the universe is discrete. Now, what does that mean, discrete in physics versus continuous? Continuous would mean that there are an infinite amount of points somewhere. On the most fundamental level, there's an infinite amount of points. In other words, you can divide a Planck to a divided Planck. We can't do that. The way that electrons move, they move in whole steps. When you get down to that smallest Planck time, things move in whole steps. They don't move in half steps or quarter steps or 8 steps. You can't measure. It's either a Planck, so it's either here, 1 Planck of space, or it's here, 2 Plancks of space, or it's here. It's never in between those things. It's always moving in that whole Planck steps, right? So that's very strange. And that's discrete time, meaning that things move in steps. Things change states. So electron doesn't have a continuous movement. It has a changing of states. What is that representative of? Very much like a video game. Very much like a movie, right? It changes. A movie is discrete. It doesn't move continuously. It's individual changing of states. What are those states that are changing? Individual pictures that are flashing on the screen, right? Blink, 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 blink. Again, let's say 60 frames a second. So 60 pictures a second is flashing on your screen, giving you the illusion that there's movement happening. But each of those movements, let's say this was here, boom, 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 they're individual changing of states. And you can see those changing of states if you have a really good TV or something that allows you to rewind a Blu-ray, and you can go frame by frame, and you can see the individual frames moving. It depends on how many frames a second. That each frame can be very, very tiny movements, but you can see each of those frames, and as you click through the frames, you can slowly see the movement, but you can see the individual changing of states, right? There's not a continuous movement, but there's a changing of finite states. And that is what we see in the universe. That should be mind-blowing right there. The fact the universe works that way is so mind-boggling. Like, why? Why does the universe work in such a way that it's like that? It's so weird that when you go down to the smallest part of time, there's individual changing of states. And that's how a video game works, by the way. So when you program a video game, you don't program a video game to say, this explosion in the background, like say you're playing Grand Theft Auto and you go blow up a car and the car goes, right? Let's say from our point of view, it takes like, I don't know, 3 seconds from our point of view. From the game's point of view, from the coding point of view, it doesn't take seconds. Oh, sorry about that. I had something pop up here. There we go. Okay, so I want to make sure it's still recording. Cool. So from the game's point of view, it doesn't take seconds. It takes frames. So you program how many frames does this take to happen. So let's say there's 120 frames, let's say. Or let's say that'd be fine. That's kind of like a little bit of lag in the game. It's not exactly 60 frames a second. It's it's like 2/3 of 60 frames a second. Or you can go 180 frames, and that'd be 60 frames a second if it took 3 seconds from our point of view. And so boom, it takes like that. Now imagine what happens when the game lags, right? And you see it slow down and everything's going very slow because it's lagging. It takes a long time. So let's say from our point of view, it now takes 10 seconds for that 3-second explosion to happen. From the video game's point of view, nothing changed. Time did not change according to the coding, according to how the game works and how time works in the game. Everything was the same because it still took 180 frames for the explosion to take place. It doesn't matter if there was big steps, big pauses because of lag in between those frames. The game still registered all 180 frames. So the time was the same. But from us, it was very different. And that gets into something a little more different within special relativity. It answers the question of why is it that, like the twin paradox, it answers the twin paradox, and that's Gnosticism's understanding of how time works, and it totally answers the twin paradox and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, so each one of these frames is a change of states in the universe. So that's the universe in its state on the Planck time, right? So you take any state of the universe right now and pause it, and on the microscopic level, on a Planck scale, that's one Planck scale, the universe right there. And everything is paused. That's the way it is. That's the way everything works. Everything in the universe, if you can go Planck by Planck by Planck by Planck, and you have a slight change, a slight change, a slight change, but it's not continuous. It's not infinite changes. They're finite changes. So from here to here, there was a finite amount of Planck changes that happened, and each of those is a slice of space-time, right? It's a frozen piece of the universe. And so how many frozen pieces from the beginning of the universe to the end of the universe for that whole entire football shape? Don't know, because that'd be huge. It'd be a huge number. Basically you have to figure out how many, just within the small couple seconds of the expansion of the universe, right? And again, remember, we're thinking about B theory of time, so the universe didn't actually expand. It's always been in all of these states. But if we think about just those first few states that have always been there, how many Planck frames are there? There's tons and tons. For every second, there's, I don't know exactly how many Planck frames, but there's probably, hundreds of thousands, if not millions. There's a lot. And I'm not sure if a physicist would want to spend the time to do that, or if they even have done that yet. But the number would be quite huge. The point is, though, there is a finite amount. For every second, there's a finite amount of actual individual frozen frames that actually exist. Okay, so this is 1, this is 2, this is 3 different frozen spaces, of actual frozen universes. And all those states, all those individual frozen universes have always existed. That's B theory of time. Great, that's awesome, that's fantastic. How do we experience time? Why is it that we feel like we're flowing through time? Now, the movie analogy I gave you earlier applies here as well. In Gnosticism, you're not this body. You're also not a soul or a spirit or anything supernatural. But you are made of a substance. The true you, the true self, is made of a substance that's able to retain all information that it ever encounters, meaning that it has total recall when it comes to its recognition of experiences. So its memory is perfect. It doesn't forget anything. So your true self can go back to anything it's ever experienced and remember exactly every detail. And this you, the real you, and if you want to know more about this, go to gnosticism.com. The link is in the description of this video, and just check out the video on. I think I have a video on it. If not, I definitely have a. Go to writings. I have a writing on exactly what Nam is. Right. So anyway, that true self, that Nam, is made of the same information stuff everything else is made of in this universe. But it works differently. The rules of how Nam works is different to how this body works. Because remember, this body is not really here right now. This is a bunch of different bodies. When I go like this, remember, those are all different changes of states of the universe. So when we come down here and we go into this state 1 right here, right? I exist somewhere in state 1, let's say. Let's say this is somewhere near the present right now. So I exist somewhere in this state. And as a brain, as my head is right here, and then that's the state, and then I have state 2, my brain is here, state 3, my brain's here. Now these are just different Planck time changes between state 1, 2, and 3 of my head, and those are individual frozen persons of my entire body. Well, in this state of my entire body, all my cells and everything are in a certain configuration. And in the next state, state 2, all my cells and everything are in a different configuration. And as I move through these different configurations of myself, I also have different brain states. That is, so I have different memories. So if I go from now to, let's say, 5 minutes from now, I would gain 5 minutes of memory. That is me, the Nam will. And this will make sense in a second. But each one of those frozen states of myself have a different brain state, therefore a different memory. And then we're going to get into like how time actually works with this. This is just think about it as a linear, because you have to understand it linearly before you understand it on a more massive scale, non-linearly. All right, so right now we're first understanding it from a flat, like 2D point of view, and then we'll get into the branching of how time actually works, because time doesn't work like some destiny thing. Anyway, so each one of these states, your brain exists in a different state. So let's say we're going to jump from like state 1 here all the way to way over here. And let's say these represent a long, like we're going to skip a bunch of Planck states. And they're like, these are 5 minutes apart. So in this state here of myself, we'll call this the present experience. We'll call this the PA for past experience. So in state 1, and then we'll call this state now. In this state here, I'll draw that in red. So in the red state, we'll call this the blue state. These are 5 minutes apart. So in the red state of existence, I had a certain set of memories that I don't have here in the blue state. So in the blue state, I have 5 minutes more of memories that I didn't have in this state here in the red state. And those 5 minutes of memories, let's say, was watching a YouTube video that was exactly 5 minutes long about penguins and how they find their mating partner. So now I have that information. Let's say I never watched anything like that before. I didn't know how they mated. And so in this state, in the blue state, I have all that 5 minutes of knowledge that this state of frozen state of me doesn't have. So if you take this frozen red state of me that has existed forever and ever, that is that physical body, the so-called physical body, this representation of self, that has physically existed, if you want to use the word physically, for all eternity. It's always been there. So blue state of me has always existed, and blue state of me has always existed, and red state of me has always existed. They're two different frozen people They're not thinking. They don't think. Why? Because they don't move. They're just frozen static things. But each of them has a different memory. And in this case, this one has a memory of a 5-minute video about how penguins mate. So it has the knowledge of how penguins mate. But the red frozen me from 5 minutes relative to that one ago in the past, if you want to think about it. There's no past or present or future. And even in relativity, that's true. Einstein said, and you can look this up, it's an exact quote of Einstein. He says, "The past, the present, and the future are illusions, no matter how persistent." And if you understand how relativity works, and then that'll make sense to you, because really, like, depending how fast you're going, time is truly relative, because time and space are interlinked. And if you're moving like away from me or toward me in space at a very high speed, then your past could be my present or my future, depending on whether you're moving away or toward me. Look into that, and it's true, and you'll see that. Okay, so if the blue me has all this information and the red me doesn't, then they're different people, but they're different static people. They're both eternal people that have always existed. They don't think, they don't move. Okay, so how do we think then? How is it that I'm a thinking thing? If these two different states of me and every other state of me has always existed for all eternity, how do I have this sensation of movement, this sensation of time, this sensation of present? Now there are some that are determinists and they say that, well, that is an illusion. But in B theory of time, that doesn't work. Because you're not moving anywhere. You're not going anywhere. So what is the you that is actually moving through these frozen states of time to give you the illusion of the present? Right? So you can't, like, if I'm this person here, if I'm person blue, right? I'm person blue. I'm this frozen person in space. I'm not going anywhere. I don't have no sense of present because there's nothing happening in my brain. I'm just a frozen person, and every molecule in me is frozen, does not move. So it has no experience at all. All these frozen selves have no experience. So how is it that we have experience? And that's what Gnosticism answers. So if the B theory of time is true, and it seems to hold true, it has the most evidence for it going for it. That's why so many physicists, believe in it, and that's why it's, and it doesn't matter whether you believe in the standard model or what model it is, B theory of time is still the prevalent view of the universe, of time and how it works. But the problem is okay, if B theory of time is true, then how am I thinking right now? Because I can't be, right? Because there's no movement. It's a big static universe. Nothing moves. Nothing has ever moved. It's all an eternal static universe. Every event has always existed, and there's no way to go from one to the other, unless consciousness is something separate from that static universe. Boom! Mind blown, right? I'm going to repeat that. Unless consciousness is something different than that static universe. And Gnosticism has known this for a long time. I have known this for a long time. Ever since my awakening I don't know. It's a long time ago. At least 20 years ago now, something like that. So when I had that awakening, I'm almost 40 now. I'll be 40 here like very, very soon, within months. Months? Yeah, very, very soon. In March. I won't give my exact birthday, but in March. Sometime in March, I'm in Aries, I will be 40 years old. That's crazy. 40 years old. Wow, time flies. Anyway, so Nam, the true self, is a conscious entity that exists separate from this static universe, because it is not a static thing. It follows a theory of time. So our consciousness actually moves through a theory of time. Consciousness moves through a theory of time. Think about that for a moment. So now what gives us this illusion of time? This illusion of experience, this illusion that we are the body, the illusion that this moment is happening and I have a past and that all this isn't static. What gives that illusion? It's just like the movie. We consciously are choosing to travel through these static persons, through these static images of ourselves. So we have the blue, or we have person red here. That's one static person who does not have, it's always existed, this static image of me, of blue me, or excuse me, of red me, has no knowledge of how penguins mate. The blue me does. And there's a bunch of me's in between the two, between the red and blue. And maybe we can represent this in a color way just really fast here. So here's the red me, and here's the blue me, right? And let's go like that, and let's go like that. So in a color way, we can kind of see that there's all magic. See all those different gradients? Each one of those is a different slice of space-time, a different frozen me, if you will. And so we have a frozen me here and here and here. All the way down, there's all these frozen me's. And so here's a frozen me, here's a frozen me, here's a frozen me, here's a frozen me. You get the idea, right? Until I finally get to the blue frozen me. And I have to go, for 5 minutes, I have to go through probably billions of frozen me's to get there. But I can do it so fast. Consciousness moves so quickly. Now, we're not just pure consciousness. We are an actual form, so to speak. We are actually made of the same information the static universe is made of. The difference is the static universe is static. It doesn't move. We are made of the same information, but our information constantly changes and moves because we work within a theory of time. And so as a conscious entity, as I begin to travel through each of these steps, boom, and I choose to travel through each one of these steps, and I travel through and I travel through until I get to this step. As I travel through each of those frozen selves, frozen me's, what happens? Well, just like the movie. As I traveled halfway and I pause time here, I'm halfway through the Penguin movie, let's say. That's this little slice of time that I've chosen to show you guys right now. That is a slice of time where I chose to go on YouTube and watch this 5-minute video about how penguins find their mate and stay with them forever. I'm somewhere halfway through the movie at this point right here. So as I chose to travel through each of these individuals, and I end up here now. Now don't worry, you're going to be thinking, well, that means that everything's destiny. We don't have no free will. No, I'm going to show you how we have free will in a second. But you got to understand the linear way first before you can understand the nonlinear way. So I'm here as the red me, zero knowledge of the penguins. And then as I move, I'm halfway through, choosing to go through all these static me's. And as I move from each static me, what happens? I develop a past, right? And that past gives me a sense of my presentness. Because now I'm halfway through the movie and I go, oh, I have some understanding of penguins now. I don't have the full understanding because I haven't finished the movie yet, but I have some understanding of penguins. And that was created by my memory, by total recall. Now you'd be asking yourself, well, how come I don't have total recall right now? Because you're limited by the static body that you're interfacing with, that you're interacting with. That limits you. And I go more into detail about that on my reincarnation video. So if you go to gnosticism.com, links in the video below, and click on that and then go to videos, I have a video there on how reincarnation works in Gnosticism. And then that also explains about the Nam and stuff too as well. It's a really good, very, very, very thought out video, I guess you could say. Anyway, so it puts all information there for you to understand exactly how reincarnation works within Gnosticism and how we interface with the body, and how when we interface with the body, that causes a type of split personality within self, and that kind of fragmented personality within self because it identifies with the body. It goes through all that, how it interfaces with all the DNA and stuff. So I'm just kind of give you a little bit of hint there so you can maybe go watch it and check it out. It's really cool. Okay, so once you understand that, then it makes perfect sense how all this works. So now, as I move through each of these static versions of me, that's each time I go through those static versions, I'm gaining information from each one. Because remember, they're infinite and eternal. Not infinite, excuse me, they're eternal. They've always been there. So this static me here, I'm going to color it black. That static me has always been. It's always existed within the B theory universe. But me, the true self, the consciousness, the Nam, has not always existed. So when I start to choose to go through each one of these persons right here, I'm going to just start marking so you can see. As I go through each one of these persons, I end up here, I'm gaining information because each one of those static persons has more information than the last one. That is, this guy right here, he has more information than this person here. He's kind of like a reddish, He's a reddish orange, and this one's red, right? So the red me, he has no understanding of penguins. The reddish orange here has a little bit of understanding because he has more information because he's watched, let's say, well, if I move it over a little bit, make it easier. He's watched exactly 2.5 minutes. So he's watched 2.5 minutes of the video. So he has 2.5 minutes of penguin information in his brain. That if I pause time right now, and that's where I chose to flow through time, and I would pause time right there, I have 2.5 minutes of more information about penguins because he does. Right? So as I choose to go through each one of these static me's, I'm gaining knowledge, I'm gaining information. And because me, the true me, doesn't forget anything, all that adds to my true memory bank of who I am. And if you imagine you do this, you choose to go through life after life, reincarnation, through many different lives. Each time you go through a line of lives, a different life, different life, different life, your true self is gaining information, gaining information, gaining information, because each of those lives has a bunch of static brains, and each of those static brains from each moment has different information in it. And depending on what path you choose to go down, you gain different information. So by the time you reach the end of that life, you've gained all the information that was in all those brains. And it stacks up, right? So there's not much difference between here and here, right? So this brain and this brain, they're both static. There's not much difference as far as information to be gathered because this one's only watched a few seconds, let's say, of the video. And because and he hasn't really done this, he's just looking at his TV screen. Yeah, he's gaining some information from other things that are happening around him. Maybe a dog's barking in the background, whatever it is. He is gaining some other information, but in those few seconds, he hasn't gained much information. The brain state has changed, but you haven't gained much knowledge yet. You haven't changed. You haven't the true you, as you traveled from this static person to this static person in a few seconds, you haven't gained a whole lot of knowledge yet. But as you go 2.5 minutes into the video, you've gained all kinds of sensory information because that brain state now is a lot different. Not only does it have 2.5 minutes of more information about penguins, it also has 2.5 minutes information about feelings on the body. Maybe it had a pain in the stomach. Maybe it had a sneeze. Maybe it heard dogs barking. Maybe it saw, your spouse walk by or some other friend walk by in your house. It saw the dog jump on the bed and jump off the bed. It gained all that sensory information as well. And now you have all that sensory information in your true self, in your Nam. As you finish the movie, you've now gained 5 minutes of information, and now you have total understanding, at least as far as the video is concerned, about penguins. You don't have total knowledge of penguins, but of what the video taught you, all that knowledge is there because all that knowledge exists in this person's head. Or excuse me, this was the halfway point. This was supposed to not be 2.5 minutes. My bad. This is the 2.5 minute mark. Sorry. This would have been half of that. So you would have been like, what is that? 1.25 or something like that. I think that's right. I don't know, top of my head. That just seems right. So 1.25 seconds. Now, when you reach the end, when you reach the blue self, now you've gained 5 minutes of information about penguins and a bunch of other sensory data that happened around you while you're watching that movie. Because all the information exists within this blue static self's head, where it didn't exist in the red static self's head. Okay, I think I spent enough time explaining that part of it. Hopefully you've wrapped your brain around this because it's not an easy concept. B theory of time in general is not an easy concept. And now we're explaining how consciousness interacts with B theory of time. And that's something totally new. It's a new theory about how consciousness is able to exist. And it's really cool because when you look at the facts about physics, about the evidence in physics, both facts and evidence in physics, so much of it lends to B theory of time. And like I said, if that's true, we can't exist as conscious entities. But we do. How? This shows that consciousness is something separate from the static universe. And Gnosticism explains that that is the Nam. Okay, so how do we have free will then? If we are choosing, how are we choosing to flow through these? If there's just a linear staticness of persons to travel through, then there would be no free will, right? Well, we can see that that's not how time works, or that's not how things work in the universe. How do things work in the universe? Well, we know everything is built of these smaller particles, and those smaller particles are built of even smaller things, and eventually in the standard model, everything is ultimately a bunch of fields and waves. That's it. Probable wave functions and field functions. They're not even real stuff. That's just in the standard model. That's the most basic. And then you get into other more weird models like the multiverse theory model, or you got the string theory, or you got the you got the digital physics. There's a bunch of different models in digital physics. The cyclic universe model, which is pretty much very similar to the standard model. You have the holographic principle model, which is very similar to like the digital physics models. Anyway, so in all these models, it's pretty much the same. So then, what happens according to these models with the particles? Well, particles don't have a set future. They have probable futures. There's many different ways. Watch the double slit experiment, for example. In the double slit experiment, particle, doesn't matter what it is, electron, photon, shoots out of a particle emitter. It hits a type of blade. So a lot of people think of it as two slits. It's not two slits. It's not like there's literally two slits on this like thing that it's going through. No, it's like that. It's like a wedge. And so there's this wedge that when the particle goes, it has to either go that way or that way. And as it goes that way or that way, that's what we think about as slits. And anyway, so I just wanted to clarify that. It's just a very, very thin like blade wedge thing that makes the particle go like this and go one way or the other way. And so we think of that as slits, and then there's an electric plate back here. And the particle's going to land somewhere on this electric plate. It might land here, might land here, might land here. And just watch the double slit experiment to get an understanding of how it works. But the basic idea is that the particle, even though one particle is going at a time, it lands somewhere randomly on a wave pattern. That is on an interference pattern. That's the way waves work. But if you put a detector, then it lands in a clumping pattern. But it doesn't matter. It's still random. So even a clumping pattern, which will look like this, or excuse me, a clumping pattern, because we have a split, it's going to look like this. Now this will be darker. That's the more probable places where that's where most of the photons are going to go. And as we go up, there'll be less and less until you get. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and just use something that can make this. So this is where most of them will go, and then as we come up here, it'll get less. As we come down here, it'll get less. Representing this by darkness. Right, so where the lightest colors are, that's the least likely place. That's where the least photons are going to land. In the center area, and this is with the clumping pattern, this when we have a detector, that's where majority of the particles are going to land. So the particles are still landing randomly. We don't know where they're going to land. We know that there's going to be like, most likely it's going to land here. There's a greater % chance it'll land either here or here, somewhere along that center, the center of these two clumping patterns, and that it'll less likely land up here, and it will definitely not land up here, meaning that where it's white, that's where it will never land, and in between, it'll never land here either. Never will a particle land there, because that doesn't, the probabilistic wave function doesn't allow it to land there. It's nope, cannot go there. So that's how the small world works. That's how everything is made of, right? So because everything works with probable futures, that is also how the timeline works. So the ultimate timeline that we travel down is not static. So now we have to go back to these images here. These images get a lot more complex now. So now the static universe doesn't just exist as a bunch of frozen universes, but for each moment, there are many frozen universes. So how to think about that? Let's take this time right here, this frozen piece of time right here, and we want to represent that frozen piece of time. Before, we represent it as just one pancake, but actually, it's represented by a bunch of frozen pancakes, right? These are all different branching possible universes that could have existed depending on where you chose to travel, right? So how to look at that is more like a branching tree. So you think about a tree has a trunk, then it has branches coming off of it, like so, and then those have branches coming off of it. Maybe this one has like 3 branches and so forth. And then these have branches coming off of it. And then some of those have a bunch of, let's say, a bunch of branches coming off of it like that, right? You get the idea. So as you start your existence as this person right now, the person you are, you're coming down at your first choice, whatever that choice is, it's most likely going to be more than just 2, but you can either go this way or that way. This is where your free will comes in. This is where you have free choice. Now it's limited because I can't just fly like Superman right now. Like, it just doesn't work. I want to fly through my ceiling, but I can't. So that's a parameter, something I can't do. That's not a possibility. But anything that's possible within that frame, so within any point where you freeze time, anything that's possible right now, you can do. So what is something I cannot do right now? Well, I can't, knock on the door of the White House right now. I can knock on this wall, but I can't just knock on the door of the White House because it's way across the country. And so I can't just do that. I don't have teleportation abilities. So there are only a certain set of, depending on different paths you took, there are always a finite amount of choices you can make. And there's a bunch of other choices that you cannot make. Now within that first port of existence, there's different choices you can make. Now let's say you're a little bit older and you're making different decisions. And you have a major life decision right here. In this major life decision, and there's a bunch of other choices you can make, but at this particular point, the decision you can make is either to, let's say, I don't know, drink or not. If you choose to drink and go down this path, then unfortunately something really bad happens because you end up drinking too much. Now, there's a bunch of other choices you can make along the way. And so then you get to here. Now you decide, okay, do I want that second drink? You decide, yeah, I want the second drink. And as you keep going down these branches, you choose, yeah, I want that third drink. At this point, your brain becomes too messed up and peer pressure, and people are like, come on, man, take the, do the beer bong, whatever, go upside down, and you decide to do that. And as you go, you get alcohol poisoning and you die. That's one path you could have taken. Another path, you could have taken the first drink, the second drink, and not taken that third drink, and went off this way like, I'm fine, I'm good, I feel a little bit relaxed and good. I'm just going to stop here, and you make different choices and you don't die. And there's always these different choices presented at every given moment, at every given time. And so now you can see that each of those are different. Each of those are different slices. So there are different yous with this knowledge. There's a you that exists, let's say with this moment, this hypothetical moment here, there's a you that exists that has always existed, that has this choice right now within its brain. It has all of its past experiences that it has gained. So let's say right now, boom, we freeze time. You have all the memories you have right now. Now let's say, hypothetically, you're given this opportunity to either take a drink or not take a drink. And that's the moment you exist in right now. You have this choice. And you're like, well, you can either drink the drink or not drink. Now there's a bunch of other choices you can do, but let's just keep it basic. That person that exists right now has that choice to make. And because it does, there exists a you over here that took that drink. There exists a you over here that did not take that drink. Those two yous have always existed as static persons. And then there's a you over here that chose to take the second drink, and a you that chose not to take the second drink. A you that chose to take the third drink, and a you that chose not to take the third drink. A you that chose to do the beer bong stand, you that chose not to, you that died, and you that didn't take the beer bong stand, therefore didn't die. Right? That is, or you that chose to call 911 and get your stomach pumped, you lived, and here you died. Okay, so these are all different yous. So every one of these dots, and this is very simplistic, there's actually a whole bunch of them, but every one of those dots are different static states of you that have always existed. And you'll never know what it feels like to be this person if you don't go down that path, because you didn't choose to go down that path. You chose, let's say, not to take a drink. So you'll never know what any of these people feel like. You'll never gain the knowledge of those brains, because the knowledge that's in those brains exists only on this timeline, and you didn't go down that timeline. So if you want to think of it as a timeline, you didn't go down that probable branch of yous that always existed. You chose to go down this probable branches of yous that always existed, and this opens up a whole new, different level branches of choices that you could make, and each of those choices, give you all different kinds of other choices and so forth. And all those yous exist, but depending on where you travel down, you're only going to experience and have the memories of those. You're not going to have the memories of all these ones. You're not going to gain the knowledge of all those ones. They have different knowledge in their head. You're never going to gain it because you as a conscious entity chose to go down different paths. So imagine there are all these probable yous out there that exist, and you're choosing which ones to go go down. So let's say this is the beginning one, and then the next state has a whole bunch of views. The next state of view has a whole bunch of views. I'm going to keep it kind of simple. The next state of view has a whole bunch of views. And each time there's probably more and more choices, right? It only makes logical sense that as you travel through each person, it opens up a whole new level of different probabilities that you can do. Now, all these probable U's have always existed, but you chose to go here, then you chose to go here and here. So you've only gained knowledge of those 4 possible U's, but all those possible U's existed just for that one little moment. That's not even a second, right? So all these other U's that have always existed, you never gained their knowledge that is in their static brains. You've only gained the knowledge in these static brains. And as you continue to go down the path of whatever it is, you go down, those are the U's, that you actually gain whatever's in their brain. And that gives you a cohesive, coherent idea of your past. If you had chosen to go down a different path, you would have had a whole different, and then you exist here and here. These two U's, these two probable U's, have a completely different past memories. Some of the memories are shared, and many of them are different. That's how it works. That gives you the sensation of the past. As you travel through these static U's, choosing which ones to go down, that's also what gives you free choice. You're making that choice. It's a conscious decision. They can't make a choice. They're static. They've always existed. They're not people. But you are choosing which of those U's to travel through and gain that experience. So as you go through each person, you're gaining that experience that that person has at that time, whatever it is. If that person is experiencing a fantastic moment of a massage, then as you go through those U's, you experience what it's like to feel each one of them, and each one of them has a different state of pleasure because they're all static. But when you put them all together, as you flow through all those static U's, you have a cohesive, logical, coherent understanding of what it feels like to get a massage. You've gained that through going through each static person. So when you only go through a couple static persons, you don't have a cohesive understanding yet because you've only went through a fraction of those persons. And together, collectively, they don't have a cohesive understanding, a full understanding of what it's like to get a massage. But as you go through all of them, then you have that full understanding, that full expression, and now you experience this full pleasure of getting a massage, and that's now part of you. And so as you think back into your past memories while you're in this body, even though you're limited by it, you have this memory of the past, and that gives you a sensation of the future. And then logically, deduction, you think about that gives you a cohesive understanding of the present, a feeling of the present. And then putting that together, thinking about, well, I wasn't where I was 5 minutes ago, so the likelihood I'll be somewhere different in the future is likely. And so then you have this idea of the future, and the future is just an idea. But the futures exist. All the probable futures exist. They always have existed, but they're not futures. From our point of view, yeah, they seem like they're futures, and they are. So that's how it works. Now, I'm going to give one more analogy really quickly here. And before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and stop each of these videos and restart them because I don't want to have them get too long. All right, so let's go ahead and continue on here. We're almost done. And now we're going to go through something interesting. Let's say, actually was explaining this to my wife, and I thought it was a pretty good analogy. Let's say there's a you that's walking down the street. And let's say this is a street, and it's got some cars on it. It has some trees on it coming up like this, and they do whatever they do. It has a dog over here that's behind this fence, and it's barking or whatever. And this is a car here, and this is the car here, and this is the car, and there's a stop sign down here at the end of the road. And you're standing right here. Now, there's different things you can do. Let's say this is one path right here. This is one path. You can actually go to that car. For some reason, there's something about this car that's captured your attention, and you want to go see what kind of car it is. Like, whoa, that's a really cool looking car. You've never seen one like it before. And so you're curious what kind of car it is. So you want to get closer to it so you can read what kind of car it is. And as you're walking, you're walking through all these static U's that exist, gaining that experience. Now, there's other branches, though. This dog over here barks, and you could have went over here down these static U's and go investigate what kind of dog it was. There's tons of different choices you could have made, but let's just make it simple. These two choices. So as you travel through these static views, you end up here. The dog barks. You can either go down this path and investigate the dog, or go down this path and then see what kind of car it is. And that's a choice. And as you move closer to the car through each of these stages, the car appears to be closer to you, but the car never moves. You never move. You are consciously moving through each of these static branes of yourself, and gaining their experience. And so because this person exists closer to the car and this person exists farther away from the car, when you're existing right here, and that's a choice you made to go through that static person, then the car looks far away. This person is closer to the car, right? That static person within relative space is closer to the car. So when you move down this static line and end up here, the car appears closer to you. And each time you go through one of those steps, the car appears closer and closer as you're consciously flowing through those static areas. And if you had gone this way, the dog would appear closer, and the dog bark would have got louder, right? So that makes sense, hopefully. These are different choices that you could have made throughout your journey. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. How B theory of time works, and then how we know that things are probabilistic. They're not guaranteed to be a certain way, and that there are many probable ways that anything can end up in. Therefore, there are many probable yous. And this is my understanding of the universe and how consciousness works, and how consciousness gains this idea of the past, present, and the future. Now, of course, this can go through each lifetime. It can get quite complicated, to where each time you reincarnate as different things. Understanding how reincarnation works, in my view, just a quick overview here, is you start out as a kind of like a rat-like creature of intelligence, and your physical self actually evolves. The physical you, if you want to call it physical, the real you evolves. It changes over time. Through each life, it gets more and more information, and it gets more and more intelligent until it outgrows that level of intelligence of creatures. So you no longer will reincarnate as that level of intelligence. You'll now reincarnate as something like lemurs and things like that, and then eventually you'll get more intelligent as you evolve and change with intelligence. It limits what you can reincarnate as. Now, when you start out, it's like, let's say you go back in your past and you were something of a lemur-like intelligence. Your next life couldn't be human. That's impossible. It's not a possibility. Right? So that's not something that could happen to you. But now that you're human, you can never come back as a lemur either, because it's too dumb. And so if you were to reincarnate as a lemur, the true self would be like, oh, it would know there was a disconnect, and right away it would know this is fake, and it would just pop right out of it, and that would be the end of that life. And so the universe knows this, and the universe works in a coherent way. Now, without going into my understanding of the universe, which takes a long time to explain, so please go watch that. That is the video on the site. That is the theory of everything. I kind of, in one of the writings, I kind of sum it up in the self-simulating universe. But basically, this isn't be impossible to go through. I really wanted to kind of express this idea, though, because it's really cool. This idea of, with reincarnation and stuff, and then how we get to each stage in our existence and intelligence levels. But I'd have to go through too much of the theory of everything and how everything is ultimately information and how all that works. But anyway, so just to sum this up then, so that time and space is a 3D projection of information. And that 3D projection has always existed. And we, at some point, came into existence as a consciousness thing, and we evolve and change over time. And each life we live, there's different paths we can take. And as we take those, whatever paths we choose to go down, which gives us this actual sense of choice, because we are making real choices. We are choosing which static selves to go between. And that's what's really cool about this theory is, if B theory of time is true, and we are actually conscious entities, which is also true, B theory of time has no way to calculate or to say that we are conscious entities, because everything's static. And so we are non-static thinking things, and so consciousness is not something that's bound to all these static selves. It's something else, which means that we have something greater some other consciousness that science can't account for right now. And I call that the Nam. And that Nam could then gain information as it goes life after life and chooses which paths it goes down, and it gets more and more intelligent, evolves and evolves and gets greater and greater and greater. But yeah, it's really the logical step to take that obviously if B theory of time is true and we are conscious entities, that then we have to exist as something else has to be given us consciousness, because those 3D things can't, because they don't move and there's nothing to move between them. And that means what? The only logical choice is that we must have free choice to choose which of those static persons to travel between. Now, if there's only one line of static persons, and yet then you're not making choices. But we know based on how the universe works, how this 3D projected universe works, that it works in probabilities. So there isn't just one future, there's probabilistic futures, which means that there are many probabilistic us's that exist. And we're choosing which of those probabilistic us's to experience as, and each one of them has a different level of information within their brain, and we gain that information as we go through each of those static selves, and that gives us this coherent idea of selfness, of presentness, of the past, because we have a memory. If we had no memory, then we'd have no sense of present. It would all just fall apart. And this is where it comes to the really cool part. So the universe has to work logically. We can see the universe works logically, it doesn't work illogically. And the universe, and this is where it gets to my self-similar universe. I'm just kind of sum it up. I know this doesn't sound so difficult and crazy, but if you go and look at my theory of everything, it'll make perfect sense. Or even just read the self-simulating article. It's really short. It'll at least give you a general idea, and but the video really is necessary to understand it fully. By the way, this is the thing for when I'm drawing on I'm drawing on a Cintiq here and digitally. And if I don't have this on, when my hand touches it, it's a touch screen. It'll move the screen around. It'll do this. I'm touching with this finger over here. It'll move around like that. But when I touch it with this thing, it doesn't allow me to move the screen around. So anyway, all right. So the universe can't produce illogical things. So why is it we move forward through time and not backwards through time? This is the question that a lot of you might already be asking right now. Like maybe you typed it already, and as you're watching the video, at some point you already typed it, and now hopefully you're still watching the video because now you have the answer. Because the universe works in a logical, coherent way. The universe is a self-processing unit. The way to think about that is the universe is basically an eternal, infinite supercomputer. If you want to call that God, fine. But it's not a thinking entity. It itself doesn't think. All right, so hopefully I remember to cut that out. Anyway, so the universe is just a processing unit. It doesn't think. It processes logically. It has certain things it has to do. It has to self-preserve, because it is a self-preservation unit. It has to process the information, and it has to do so logically. That's what it is. That's how it has to work. And so if it produces something that doesn't work that way, then it's not living according to its nature. So it doesn't think about stuff like, hey, who am I? What am I? What are you? I'm going to create this thing. That's not how it thinks. It just processes information, and information works in this logical way, and the way that it works is in a way that brings about things as they are. Now, the 3D projecting universe has always been there. That coexists as an outgrowth. Anyway, just watch my theory of everything to understand how that works. You have to first understand it as in a linear time, then to understand it as a static time, how it's always been doing this and making it exist. But the consciousnesses are something that came about later, and that's a whole other topic about why it produced them. But once they're there, it has to work in a certain way, and that is a logical way. So if it allowed you to go forward and backward through time, watch what would happen. You would go crazy. And that's not, the universe tries to self-preserve itself and self-preserve every unit within the universe, so that is every person, everything, to make it work cohesively, coherently, logically. And if it allows you to go forward and backward through time, let's say there's this branch here you could have gone down, and there's all these different choices. Each one of these, I'm just going to mark the major choices here as individual selves that you've went through as these static selves. When you try to go backwards in time, there's no way you can take the exact same path backwards. So if you can move forward and backwards through the different selves that exist, you're never going to go exactly the same way you came. Even for like 2 seconds you can't, because every molecule in your body is different based on the different choices that were that were made, and there's so many different yous that exist from just me going like this. There's so many me's that existed because I could have went like this, 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 I could have went like this. There's so many different things I could have chose to do and didn't do. Instead, I chose to go like this. And so I go like this. How do I reverse time? I can't just go like this because I'd have to talk backwards. And of course I could if I'm flowing backwards through those times, then I would be talking backwards, right? And you're choosing consciously what to say, but what you can say is limited to the static U's that exist. But there's a lot of static U's that exist. So I could say poop, dog, cat, fan, like all these different words I can say, but there's other words I cannot say because I don't know them. I can say Bereshit, that's a Hebrew word in the beginning. But there's words I don't know. I can say she, thank you in Chinese, but there's so many words I don't know that I can't say. Those are not possible means that exist. At least not right now. Maybe there was a branch in the past I could have taken that knew German or something, but I didn't take that path, so I don't know German. And so that branch is so far removed from me that right now I can't say those German words. I can say Zaktanis because I learned that when I was a kid. I think I shut up in Russian. Anyway, so as we go backwards through time, we're never gonna go to this. We're never gonna meet this exact same point. So here's the point we're at now. Here's the point we're at. We chose to go through these branches. As we go backwards, we're gonna take little slight variances, and we're gonna end up somewhere else in a different past, because it's impossible for us to go backwards in time exactly, because we can't remember every little thing perfectly. As we're trying to look back and remember, because as a limited, when we're limited by the body, we don't have perfect recollection. So we can't remember everything we said. We can't remember every little thing we did. We can't remember if our finger was here or there. So if you can actually see those past, remember, we can't see the selves, right? So I can't visually see all these possible selves in front of me that exist. They're invisible to me. I can't see them because they're there. They all exist within this probabilistic function of the universe, but I can't see them. So I don't know which one to go down. I don't know what my choices are. I'm just flowing through time, and I'm consciously making choices. And as I constantly make those choices, which are limited by that parameter of me's that exist, so I can never have a thought if that parameter of me's don't exist. So I am limited by that. So my free will is limited by the parameter of possible me's that exist out there. I don't have a sense of them though. And so how do I have a sense of the ones that are in the past? I don't. I would only have my memory of the past. But as I try to recreate that memory and go backwards, I don't have perfect recollection. So I couldn't remember, did I go exactly like this? Or like this? Or like this? Or did it go bigger like this? I don't know what I just did in the past. So if I try to go back through time, I can't see it. I can only remember it. So I have to try to recollect things with perfect recollection, which you cannot do while you're interfacing with the bodies because you're limited through them. And so you would end up somewhere else in the past, in a different past you that has a different memory. Now suppose at some point here you bought a dog, and then by the time you got here, you loved that dog. And as you went back in time, trying to retrace your steps, you mess up and you get back here where you don't have it here, or excuse me, I didn't mean to say I meant here you bought the dog. And here you love the dog, and here you love the dog more. As you go back through time, you end up in a place where no dog. But you remember having the dog, you remember loving the dog, right? Because you don't lose those memories. It's because you're going backwards and forward in time. Your memory is staying intact. So you're like, wait, I remember I love that dog, and now I don't have the dog. And so you go back in the past, you're trying to rewind and go and experience the past. But when you do, you accidentally erase the dog, because you ended up in a past you, in a static you that doesn't have the dog because it never bought the dog, because the you here went down a different path than the you here. Right? Maybe they crossed paths at some point, but they went down different paths. And at some point on here, you bought the dog. And some point here, you never buy the dog. Right? So because you didn't ever go down that path right there. So the you here has no dog. The you here has the dog. And as you go backwards in time, no more dog, and then you're very sad because you're like, oh my God, my dog. So then you try to go, backwards in time again to where you bought the dog, and you mess up and you don't remember because there's this whole different timeline, and you're trying to remember, you can never get here where you bought the dog, and so you go somewhere else and and you try to find the dog where it was for sale for, but now the dog's gone. It's not for sale anymore. Someone else bought it. Now you can't even buy the dog. Now you can't get your dog back. So you go back forward in time, and you go back backwards in time, and every time you go back and forth, you mess up time more and more. Now all of a sudden you exist here as this static self. And this static self, you don't have your wife anymore. Your wife is gone. Because the choices you made, something happened and she's gone. She's no longer in your life. No more wife, or no more husband, depending on what sex you are. And you're like, oh my gosh, I mess up things so bad. This is no good for the brain. Consciousness cannot handle this. It wouldn't be able to handle this idea of going back and forward and not being able to fix things and things getting worse and worse and worse. It's not coherent. It's not logical. And so the universe has to work in a coherent, logical way. And so that's why you can only go forward through what we think of as time. Because the universe knows that logically this event takes place before this event. Because it's younger. It's a logical calculation. So it knows this entire, it knows this entire system, and that this is considered the beginning, this is considered the end, this is considered the middle, and so forth. It all cohesively works together in this way. And so it allows you to flow that way, because that's the logical, cohesive way that the universe, it doesn't understand the way that we understand. It understands the way a computer understands, right? So it analyzes information. Information says logically this is the way that things move or that things change. There's steps and changes, and that obviously if there's a step of you being old and a step of you being young, the steps don't go this way, because it can see the logical progressions. From death to life makes no sense, it's not logical. From life to death makes sense and it's logical. It's able to see all this in a way, in an informational way. And so it has an understanding of the universe like a robot would, kind of, but not a sentient robot, like a computer. And that's why you can only flow through the time the way that it sees logically the way that things should work. And it can run all these different processes and probabilities and calculations. What if person A were able to choose to go backwards in time, and it can see all these different errors that can happen. Another error can happen is, what if you could flow backwards in time and then kill your grandfather, and therefore you're never born? This creates a logical problem. Because if you were to go backwards in time and kill your grandfather, then that means that you were never born. And if you were never born, then how did you ever go backwards in time to kill your grandfather? It's a paradox, and this is a paradox that's mentioned by Einstein. And so my understanding of time travel is you cannot actually time travel, but we can one day build a device where we can view the past. The problem is, remember, there are multiple past and multiple futures from not from our point of view, but the kind of is from our point of view, if you have this understanding. From the universe's point of view, all those possible past and possible futures and presents, all of that exists as one cohesive unit. So when you choose to view the past, if we ever build a device that can do this, and you can view the past, you won't be able to actually go there, but you can view it. If you can never go there, you'd be there like a ghost, and you'd just be walking through. People wouldn't be able to see you. You would be just interacting with the past. Well, you wouldn't be interacting with it. You'd just be viewing the past, basically. But how do you know that you're viewing your past, or the proper past? So as you're viewing the past, you'd have to try to focus it on the probable past that exists on your probabilistic timeline. And if not, then you could be viewing an entirely different past. And let's say you're trying to gain information. Let's say you're trying to figure out in the past if your girlfriend or wife or husband, whoever you're with, if they were cheating on you. And you have this device, and you go and you view the past, and you see them cheat on you. But you didn't realize that you were actually viewing an alternative past, a past that doesn't exist on your timeline. A past where they had a choice where they could have cheated on you. And on that choice, right, so let's say this is the past, this is your significant other. They could have cheated on you, or they could have chosen not to cheat on you. And as you're viewing the past here, this is the branch where they did not cheat, and this is the past where they did cheat. And if you're viewing the past from way over here with your device, and you view this branch line, then you're like, oh cool, they didn't cheat on me. If you view this timeline here that's not connected, this is the timeline that you guys both went down and ended up together here. this timeline you guys both end together, but that's not the you that's not the timeline you travel down. This is a static you, but it's not the you that is consciously existing right now in this person here. So you are consciously existing here. Actually, maybe I shouldn't do an X. You're consciously existing here. You're not consciously existing here. This isn't the path you guys went down. You guys went down this path here. But you accidentally view this past, the point where the person cheated on you. Now you think, oh my God, he cheated on me, and it causes all kinds of problems in your marital status and whatever. Your relationship gets all messed up because of it, because you think you viewed the proper past, but you didn't. You viewed a past, but maybe if you viewed enough of it, you would see things were different. Like, wait, I don't remember that happening. That didn't happen. Wait, that's weird. Actually, no, this is all different. Like if you viewed enough of the past, you probably be able to realize you're viewing the wrong past probable timeline. And maybe if you just viewed it all the way up like that, but then, if we ever have this device, we should be able to also view maybe other possible presents or other possible futures, and that could cause error. I can't really think of so many errors it can cause, but I have to think about it for a little bit. But it could cause possible errors, and if it could cause possible errors, then reality will not allow it to happen. No matter how hard you try to build a device, the device will be impossible to build. But I can't see just viewing the past really being too much of causing logical errors. So we might one day be able to view the past. But anyway, and we might be able to view the future. Who knows? I don't have any recollection of this device ever existing on any of the planets I remember being on that have a very, very advanced technology. That's not a technology I remember ever existing. And I'm pretty sure if that technology existed, I probably would have remembered it or brought it back with me. I remember all kinds of crazy technology. And if you guys have any questions about that and want to know, well, what is it you remember or don't remember? When I had my awakening experience, if you want to know more about that, I talk about my awakening experience, I think, in a video, on the video section. I also talk about it in brief and a writing. So if you go to gnosticism.com, link is in the description. I'm trying to talk fast to get through this video because I don't want it to go on too much longer. And anyway, if you go to that website and then click on writings, I have my very first writing is how I awakened, how I gained all this knowledge and understanding. And it's quite interesting because it happened in a very brief moment of meditation. I was a totally different person as far as beliefs go prior and before this one meditation experience about 20 years ago. And when I had this experience, I came back in an entirely different, not person. I was still the same person as far as like personality, spontaneous, like a lot of those traits were still there, but I was a very different kind of person. I was totally passive, whereas before I was big time, like aggressive fighter. Just so much about me changed because I gained all this knowledge, information about many of my lives, and most of my lives were on other planets, very advanced planets, and with very advanced technology. Now, unfortunately, this brain can only understand so much of the math, so much of the stuff, the information, so it understands it in a kind of a layman's term, but I can at least describe how things looked, how they worked, but I'm limited to this body and how I describe that kind of stuff, which is unfortunate. And I tried to expand that through meditation as much as I can. But anyway, I came back with encyclopedias worth of information. This is just a fragment of the information I came back with that I'm showing now. And if you watch my Theory of Everything, that's just a fragment. Watch how reincarnation works. That's just a fragment. I mean, I have so much knowledge I came back with. It was about a 30-minute session of meditation. And I came back with books and books and books. If I were to sit here and just try to tell you everything that I remembered during that 30 minutes that I was experiencing myself and what I was able to bring back and get my brain to hold on to. A lot of it my brain couldn't hold on to and it flew away. Kind of like when you wake up from a dream and you remember it and all of a sudden it starts fading. You're like, oh no, you're trying to grab onto them, and then all you remember is this little piece of the dream. You're like, man, that was such a good dream, but I can't remember most of it now. Kind of like that. So it's only, because my brain, my true self has so much knowledge, information, and I'm only able to bring back little pieces up here and there, and I keep trying to go back and bring back, but the brain can only understand so much and handle so much of it. But nonetheless, if I were to sit here and just talk straight to you of everything I remember, and I talk pretty fast, it would take days and days and days and days. And by days, I mean 24 hours, 24 hours, 24 hours, 24 hours. It would take probably at least a month. And by a month, I mean 30 times 24 hours. That's how many hours it would take. At least that. Like, I would have to talk constantly to you. Like, it would take us months and months in real time because we can't just sit up and talk for 24 hours straight. So I'd say every day I spend a few hours talking. It would take months and months and months and months and months, maybe years, before I finally
was able to transmit all the understanding, all the information that I gained, all my memories and everything. That's how much I brought back with me. And that's why it was such a powerful experience, because when I came back, I was like, boom, whoa, that's impossible. There's no way I could have just gained all that. I couldn't have just thought up all the information in 30 minutes. Like, it's just too much. And anyways, it was an awesome experience. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this at all, please like, subscribe, share. When you subscribe now, YouTube is dumb. They change. I don't know why they did this, but it's almost like they don't want you to come back to people's channels or something. I don't know if they do this to everyone's channels. I bet you those top channels, they don't have to do this. But on lower channels, you have to do this. So after you hit subscribe, it may be because they're the YouTube Red, they're trying to promote that. I don't know what they're trying to do, but it's really lame because it makes you hard for you to get notified when I have a new video. So if you want to be notified of a new video, after you subscribe, you have to click on my name, Gnosticism, right there. Click on my actual name underneath the video. You'll see the video and my name right there. So click on my nickname. That will take you to my channel's homepage. On my channel's homepage, after you're subscribed, if you want to subscribe there, hit the subscribe button. After you subscribe, you'll see a little new icon right next to the subscribe button. And it's a little bell. You have to click on that bell, and then the little pop-up will pop up and say that you want notifications. So that way when I do come out with new videos, you'll get them. If not, then you won't get the notifications and I'll vanish. You'll probably never see me again because YouTube is that way. But anyway, so thank you for watching, and leave comments. Please leave comments in the comment section. I would really, really appreciate it. Just whatever comment you want to leave. If you have any questions at all about any of this, let me know, and I'll do my best to get back and answer you. And then if you just want to know stuff like about my experiences that I remember, then ask those questions and I can tell you about what I remember about like these technologies and stuff like that. For example, I mean, years and years ago, I predicted that I predicted how video games would evolve. And I didn't predict it in the sense of I'm a psychic, I can see the future. I predicted it based on my memory of the past on another planet. And on that planet, video games were super advanced. And so I'm like, I remember some of the history of how video games changed on that planet. And so I'm like, well, if it did that on that planet, it's likely to do it on this planet because technology kind of seems to evolve the same. And I base that on many memories of being on different planets and how technology evolves. All of it kind of evolves pretty similarly. Of course, a lot of these planets are very different and technology takes different paths. But if they have the video games the way, I can see that the past of those video games were very similar to the past of our video games. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure it'll evolve the same. And so I predicted that we'd have interactive games way before the Wii was ever even thought of. That we'd have interactive games where we're actually interacting with the screen, and then that we'd have interactive like virtual reality type stuff. And then now we got the augmented reality coming out where you interact with holograms. And I even saw, because in this planet, for example, we had super advanced video games where it was like at the holodeck basically. But prior to that, if I go back in history, before we had that kind of technology, we had this more primitive technology where primitive compared to the holodeck, but you can interact with holograms. It was the very beginning of interactive holograms, where the video games is where the holograms were actually in your room, but not by wearing a device. You had like contacts on, so you didn't have to wear this big bulky device. And the contacts will allow you to see your normal room, your normal house, your normal settings environment, but also whatever the game environment it's set up for you. You can like change your wall and make it look different. And so it's kind of like that, the HoloLens, but with contacts and a lot more, way more interactive because you can actually feel the force feedback of the hologram. So if you went up and picked up a gun, you can kind of almost feel the weight of it. You can it has a force feedback on your hand. And it's like you can kind of feel like you're holding on to something, and you can grab that holographic gun and actually use it. And then you can punch holograms, and you can kind of feel the impact a little bit. Like there's a little bit of like force feedback to all the holograms, and it's kind of like a bodysuit that allowed, like kind of like vibrated and like basically activated your nervous system. And so it kind of give you the feeling of, hey, I'm punching something, like it's solid. It kind of gives that feeling of solidity, and it was really cool. And so that's where our video games will go. So, but now it's a lot more believable now that that's where they'll go compared to, when I started talking about this like 20 years ago. 20 years ago when I was talking about this kind of stuff, that sounded very far out. Like, oh, we're never going to have that. Video games are never going to be that advanced, whatever, man. Video games might just die out altogether. And they could, right? Who's to say that video games will continue their popularity and that they'll continue to be popular? Sorry, I keep looking over here instead of at the camera. But there's no guarantee for that. The video games at any time can just stop being popular and fade away like a fad of the past, and no one even play, like just a couple of people play video games, but no one develop. If the popularity of video games shrinks, then all these companies are going to stop putting billions of dollars into building new technology. So we'll never see the holographic technology. So that's a possibility. That's a possible future. But based on the different paths I've seen, I'm pretty positive that we're heading down that path. But 20 years ago, it was far less believable. Now it's more believable. But anyway, I was talking about this, like 20 years ago, and I was talking about how we would, first we would have the more primitive interactions where we have like some sort of, basically I was describing something like the Kinect, where we use our body as the controller, and then we also will have like different controllers, different mechanisms that we can use to interact with stuff and punch stuff and swing some type of controller mechanism that is like almost an extension of our body, and that was kind of like what the Wii was. Then I was talking about how it would continue to evolve like that, and that more interactive games with like with augmented reality and things like that, and virtual reality, we're actually getting into the game and we're there and part of the game, and then they're actually going to find a way. Well, I don't know for sure if this will happen, but it did happen on another planet that I was on, where they found a way to tap into our what is it? Like dream state, to tap into that dream state, the part of our mind that is able to create dreams, and it's able to create entire worlds that feel real. It's able to tap into that and control that so that you can actually have it can control your dream experience. So it can so you are your mind is basically creating the video game landscape, but it's based on, it puts in the information and kind of like makes your brain create this experience, and it feels so real to you because it's like a controlled dream where you feel like you're kind of in control of the dream, but they're controlling how the dream changes and morphs around you, and you're just flowing with it and going with it and part of the game, and they set up different goals and things. So it's like a video game where you have to go and meet these goals and stuff like that, and it was just really cool. And I can see that being a possibility on this planet perhaps, but we might not take that path if video games come. But definitely I think we'll take the path of interactive holographic games where we actually can punch a hologram and stuff like that, like actually interact with holograms in our house, and it's going to be really cool. So yeah, anyway, thanks for watching. Again, I just wanted to kind of explain a little about that. Hopefully I'm trying to tantalize you to want to know more about these other places and stuff like that, and different knowledge, so we can have interaction. And yeah, if you ever want to talk to me, I'm often debating on paltalk.com. I'll write this down on the screen for you. So it's paltalk.com. So it's pal and then talk.com, and you can download it for free on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer, notebook, whatever you have. And it's really awesome. It's a voice and text chatting program, so you can go on different rooms and text chat and stuff like that. The room I'm usually in is called, I'm actually go to Pal Talk right now and see what the room is called. I think it's Religious Debate. There's actually two different rooms I go to, and it's in the spirituality section. I'm gonna tell you right now how to get there, because I'm gonna go there right now. So you click on all rooms, then you go to the religion and spirituality section. You click on Christianity. I'm not a Christian, but it's just these rooms are very free speech rooms, which is why I go to them. And one is called Religion, Politics, Science Debate Chat Central. And the other one that I usually go to is called Uncensored Religion Debate. My name on there is Karmic Overflow. It's like that with two capitals like this, and I think there's a space also between them. Not an actual underscore, but there's just a blank space. So it's two different words, Karmic Overflow. And if you want to add me, whatever, don't add me. I don't really add people. So, but I do interact with people that want to interact with me. And so you can find me there. And what's really cool about these two rooms, especially the Uncensored Religion Debate, is we talk about everything from science to philosophy to religious debate. We have all different kinds of discussions, and yeah, so we talk about reincarnation often. When I'm there, we often talk about reincarnation, because I'll come up and start, if it's just nothing's really happening, I'll start talking about my views of reincarnation and try to get other people to engage and start talking about the practicality of reincarnation. and what reincarnation is according to my view. And it's kind of fun. And so yeah, if you ever want to just come and like interact and ask me some questions, you can do that there. And if I'm not too busy, whatever, I might even open up my room, and then I can invite you to that room, and or tell you the name of the room. You can find it or invite you to it, and then we can have a discussion about different philosophies and ask me questions and stuff. So, all right, thank you for watching. Again, this time I'm really going. All right, bye.